professeur invité à l'Université de Montréal, chercheur invité au Cérium. C'est mon grand honneur aujourd'hui de recevoir l'ambassadeur Arnold Chacon, qui est ambassadeur par intérim américain au Canada. Évidemment, notre conversation va se passer en anglais. On aura le temps pour des questions de l'audience à la fin. On vous demande de poser vos questions dans le chat, dans la langue que vous voulez, et ensuite, je les poserai en anglais.
Bonjour, Madame Deschamps-Laporte. Un plaisir.
Welcome, Ambassador. It's such an honor to have you here at Université de Montréal. Thank you for being here in person. It feels quite special, I have to say. So I'll jump right into it, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
So you had an election less than a year ago. We just had an election. Before that, we had major milestones with the renegotiation of a new NAFTA. So I'd like to know, in your mind, what are the main priorities for this U.S.-Canada relationship?
Well, you're absolutely right. We have vibrant democracies, and they keep us on our toes. But I think this is why we identify so much with Canada. We have the same value system, the same democratic traditions. We certainly are connected by history, geography, and our future. So what is significant is that at the beginning of the Biden administration in February, the United States and Canada had a bilateral meeting. It was a virtual meeting, to be sure, but it was the first one that we had with a foreign country. And there we unveiled what we called the roadmap for a renewed partnership between the United States and Canada. And that was a terrific document because it helps us focus attention on the priorities in terms of where we want to go, what is it that we want to accomplish. And very important blueprint laying out 6 pillars, again, where the first and foremost, of course, was our attention to COVID-19 pandemic. And we continue to wrestle with that, but that was front and center of the agreement to work together to overcome this. And then again, in that context, we wanted to build back better the economy, which again has been devastated by COVID. And in that regard, we wanted to do it in a way that focused attention on people that were left behind. So we wanted to grow back the economy in a way that helped workers and underrepresented groups, benefit from the rebound that we will have. So the diversity and inclusion is a very important common value that we have. Climate change, front and center. Both our countries, again, understand the importance of this. We want to work together on that. And then again, there were 2 other important areas. One was, of course, bolstering our security and defense cooperation and alliance. The United States and Canada are founding members of NATO. We have a binational command in the North American Aerospace Defense Command. And then finally, we want to work together in building bridges and working together on hotspots around the world, whether that's in our hemisphere in Haiti or in Afghanistan. Again, we outline the fact that we really want to work together, and we have a lot we can offer together in that regard.
That's a very comprehensive answer, and we'll have a chance to go through all of these points in one way or another. And I think, speaking as a Canadian, it was definitely reassuring. It was reassuring to see that first call, that first meeting happen right away after some moments of anxiety over the past years, I think would be one way to put it. I'd like to dive in a little bit more on the nature of this very special diplomatic relationship. So I mentioned this moment of renegotiation of NAFTA over the past year because it was so important politically for both of our countries and of course economically as well. What we've seen through that process is not only foreign ministries, ministers, cabinet members work together, but MPs, industry representatives, labor unions, everyone wants to get involved in these big processes between Canada and the US. As a diplomat, as an ambassador, what does that mean to you? Is this complexity something to leverage, or is it sometimes hard to manage?
I think you hit on it. It is important to leverage. We modernized the free trade agreement. It's a success story, but we have to, of course, modernize it to deal with the challenges of today. So in that regard, we wanted to make sure that the people understood that it is in their interests, and so we need to involve everyone. Whether it is our government, whether our parliamentarians, but civil society, unions, the common person, so that they understand this is a win-win. So I see it as an opportunity. It isn't easy. It's always difficult to manage those things, but in a democracy, you need to do that if you're going to get the buy-in and the support that you need to take this relationship to the next level.
Mm-hmm. I can just imagine, though, everyone has their own interlocutors, so just keeping track of everything that's happening must be quite challenging at times.
It certainly is challenging. Again, it's never easy because people advocate, for their own particular interests. But when it comes together, it works really, really well. But I would just emphasize, we need the support of the people, and too often we don't include them to understand why it is in their interests, why it matters to their bottom line. And I think this is one way to go out and tell the story, a message, and make them feel that they're part of the process, that it's inclusive, and that in fact we are focused on, underrepresented communities and on union and on workers and the like, so that in fact they will buy into this and make it work.
All right, thank you. So obviously the COVID-19 pandemic is not over. This is one of the reasons most of our audience today is on YouTube. We would much rather have them in person. And this pandemic does not know geographic borders. It travels. And what is it that Canada and the US can do? Other initiatives, what can we reinforce together to fight the pandemic? Especially on issues such as, for example, supply chains or the movement of people. We hear a lot from Canadians. When is the next deadline? Is the border going to open? When are Canadians going to be able to travel a bit more freely to the US, knowing how linked our people are?
Very, very good question. Certainly this is the highest priority. Prime Minister Trudeau did participate in a virtual COVID-19 summit that President Biden hosted at the White House on September the 22nd. He was a featured speaker, so again, he was able to outline, what Canada's goals are here, which of course coincide with ours as well, and that is to vaccinate the entire world, not just our populations. I must say Canada did a terrific job in record time of vaccinating the vast majority of their people. That really is something to be proud of. But again, we need to think outside our borders. So, for instance, the United States has pledged 1.1 billion vaccines, COVID vaccines, for the entire world, because it does us no one any good if we're an island and we're not, again, vaccinating everyone else. I think also we want to look forward, to the next global pandemic. What have we learned from this? Are we going to be prepared? How can we leverage all of the, international partners and international multilateral organizations, in terms of public health? I think back on, our PEPFAR, our AIDS initiative in Africa, that worked so well, and at the time it seemed like such a daunting challenge. But when you cooperate with your partners and, you take on these challenges, you really can see success. And so I think that is what we're seeking to do. It's remarkable that despite the challenge of COVID, we did manage to keep our border open, to essential traffic, to trade, et cetera. It wasn't perfect, but, the supply chains did work. We can always make them better, and this is what we're seeking to do in kind of evaluating what happened so that, we are better prepared to be more resilient, to be able to counter, these challenges when they happen again in the future. But I would say that we're on the same page, and we will have the same values, and we want and count on Canada's participation going forward.
All right, so we've all been watching the large discussions and debate in the Senate and elsewhere on this infrastructure overhaul that's been promised by President Biden. This idea to build back better, to use the opportunity of this horrible crisis to improve our economy is something that, of course, exists in Canada as well. So I'd like to know, how can Canadian industry contribute to this American infrastructure overhaul, and what are joint initiatives that can be promoted and undertaken by Canada and the US to ensure this economic recovery after the pandemic?
Well, I think it's important to appreciate just what Canada can contribute. For instance, here in Quebec, your aerospace industry is very dynamic and on the cutting edge of green technology. So we have a lot to learn from you, and your contribution there is going to be absolutely essential. You know, your rare minerals, whether it's lithium or cobalt, you know, are absolutely essential to electric vehicles, which is the future. So again, we want to strengthen those supply chains. We want to encourage, you know, the production, so that in fact we can move quickly to you know, clean energy options for transportation. So I think it goes across the board that you have a lot to offer just because of your, you know, your highly educated population, the innovation that takes place here, and the fact that we both want the same things in terms of clean energy. I think it's Hydro-Quebec that's going to be providing New York State with a significant,
deal, yeah.
Absolutely, very significant, providing that clean energy. So again, we're aligned, absolutely. We want to align even more, but again, it's good to partner with someone that appreciates the importance of climate. We, of course, have designated our former Secretary of State, John Kerry, to this initiative, and he's charging ahead. You know, he has met many times with, you know, Minister Wilkinson. I want to say at least 4 times. We're getting ready for the COP26 conference in Glasgow. There was a pre-meeting that just took place in Italy. So people are working very hard to align our interests so that this can be actually a success. When President Biden returned, we joined the Paris Climate Accord again. You know, we made it very clear that we value our relationships with our partners, and we're rebuilding, you know, that multilateral mechanism that helps us all.
That's perfect. I had planned a question on climate change, but I love that you see the economy and climate change as integral to one another. So you answer both of my questions. Okay. That's perfect. So on security and defense, in your introduction, you talked about the importance of our joint industry, of our participation in NORAD, NATO, a lot of the big security initiatives that we have together. So I'd love to hear what you think are the main areas of collaboration, more specifically in terms of what you want to achieve here in your role. But also, there's been a lot of talk about the US, UK, Australia AUKUS alliance and the Asia Pacific. And many Canadian experts and foreign policy watchers have been wondering if that means a change in what the Five Eyes does on intelligence, or should it be interpreted as the Canada-US within the Five Eyes intelligence relation taking a backseat?
Oh, absolutely not. I think this in no way diminishes the strength of our relationship that will continue to go forward. It was not intended to replace this privileged partnership that we have through Five Eyes with Canada. I think everyone benefits, you know, when you know, elements of a relationship are strengthened. And again, I think that Canada understands this, and the response has been very positive. You know, everybody comes out winning in this regard. When you think of defense, I think people don't recall that, you know, the defense in our country at least was on the leading edge of innovation. Silicon Valley, got its start from a lot of defense investment, at the outset. Absolutely, the internet. So there's a lot of potential there. So it isn't just, what people perhaps think of, guns and missiles and things. It's more broad, and again, I think this is where the value added comes in, that defense can spur innovation that in fact provide us security in a variety of different ways. As I mentioned, Canada and the United States are founding partners of NATO. NATO is pivoting, it is less focused on Europe and now more focused on the Indo-Pacific region. Again, it's an agile organization, but again, tying everybody together based on values and on, promoting our common democratic values and human rights and the like. So that's encouraging that Canada continues to be a key partner there in NATO. And as I said, the binational command is the only one, after 60 years that exists in the world. And again, we're tied at the hip in that regard. There's no light between us on that front. So again, we have so many things that are of mutual interest that I think it will only grow with the security and defense cooperation that we hope continues to take place.
Well, that's certainly reassuring to hear. And what's been interesting or of note in the Five Eyes over the past year is if it was a bit of historically more of a technical community, if I could say, there's been more and more ministerial meeting, and it's taken, let's say, the involvement of the highest level of foreign ministries and defense and our intelligence ministers, wherever they are responsible for that. I've been also involved having more political talks, so I thought that maybe signal actually a strengthening of the Five Eyes. So hopefully that's what we continue to see.
And if I can add, law enforcement cooperation, I sometimes, that is still security. And again, we have this phenomenal cooperation between our respective, police and other entities involved in law enforcement. And that's very, very positive because we have the world's largest border, longest border, and again, what happens here, has implications in the States and vice versa. So, while, sometimes we have different regimes or legal regimes or different things, we continue to work really strongly to partner with each other to ensure that, our people are secure and safe, and that in fact, we can, leverage our abilities to combat organized crime, human smuggling, and the list goes on and on. So we owe, the RCMP and other, agencies a debt of gratitude for, being there for us. And again, we want to, of course, do everything that we can to strengthen their effectiveness.
Well, thank you, Ambassador. So over the past year, we've heard President Biden talking about repairing alliances and getting back, getting the U.S.'s voice back as a strong supporter of multilateralism. What is it that Canada and the U.S. can do on that front? I'm thinking in multilateral organization, but also specifically at the UN, for example.
Great question. Obviously, these challenges are so daunting, no country can do them alone. It doesn't make any sense. But more importantly, you can be much more effective when you partner with the United Nations and other multilateral organizations. Canada has been, an incredible partner, for instance, in Venezuela. They hosted a donors conference, to provide, significant humanitarian aid to Venezuela, that has, refugees on par with Syria, and we don't really understand that. Canada works through multilateral organizations and with us on issues in Haiti, certainly on Nicaragua. So again, we of course leverage our influence when we bring others into the equation with us as well. So we want to strengthen international organizations, to be sure. They're a work in progress. They're not perfect. But when you're on the inside, you have a better way of influencing that process than if you're not. So whether it's NATO, whether it's the Organization of American States, there are a variety of forums that we want to work closely with Canada on to, again, affect change in a positive way, and we certainly can't do it alone without, not only Canada, but our other partners throughout the world.
Like that you gave a lot of these Central American, Latin American examples, because these are certainly parts of the world where you've served, including as ambassador to Guatemala, I believe, right? So you would
That's
know
right.
well these dynamics.
Yes, again, in a way, they're not foreign countries to us. They're part of our domestic, situation in the United States. So it has to be approached, very differently. And again, they're daunting challenges, but we need to engage in a sustained way. And find ways to empower people that have been left behind, that emigrate because, they don't want to, but they have to, And climate, for instance, in Guatemala has wreaked havoc with, the coffee production and other forms of livelihood because of droughts and floods and hurricanes and the like. So people, if they want to stay there and be productive, they can't because, there are no opportunities because of situations like climate change. So everything is interrelated, everything is intertwined, and I think you have to take this kind of comprehensive approach when you look at any problem.
If I may, I'd like to ask you a bit of a more personal question. So both of our countries right now are celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. And maybe I'd like to hear what this means to you as a diplomat and ambassador of Hispanic origin.
Well, like Canada, we like to celebrate our diversity, and it's very, very important. We're the country that we are because we are able to leverage all of this diverse talent. My family came to the Southwest United States before it was the Southwest United States. We came in the 1700s.
Wow.
So the border came to us. We didn't, cross the border. That's not to suggest that
Not
people...
too far after my family came here, I suppose.
So we have a long history, but again, we do celebrate the diversity. It's very important, I think, for our foreign service to reflect the rich diversity that we are, because we're more effective in our messaging. And again, I think that's what Hispanic heritage is all about. We want to compete for talent. We want, Hispanic young people to consider careers in public service. It's a career with purpose and meaning. There's a lot that can be done. So when I was the Director General of the Foreign Service, I made a big push to increase the number of paid internships so that they could get in and learn over a summer at an embassy or in the State Department and understand the work that we do so that they could consider, actually a full-time career in this regard. So we have a number of affinity groups that celebrate their contributions in various ways in the State Department, and this happens to be the Hispanic Heritage Month, but our Asian American groups are there, and Muslim American groups, LGBTQ, it goes on and on. Because it isn't just the right thing to do because of our values, but it's the smart thing to do. Obviously, we enhance our effectiveness when, again, we draw from the very talented pool of people that we have.
Well, as a professor who teaches a lot of bright young people who want to have a career in our own diplomatic service in Canada, I commend you for this initiative of multiplying the internships, the paid internship, and hopefully we can follow suit. All right, so a little bit more of a technical question. Many of us have been watching closely the nomination of David L. Cohen, President Biden's pick for ambassador to Canada. The hearing in the Senate was just happening, I guess, about 10 days ago.
That's right.
So for those of us who are not as familiar with the nomination process for ambassadors, maybe you can enlighten us on what happens, how long does that take, when can we expect the new ambassador to come north?
Well, our Constitution talks very specifically about the advice and consent of the Senate for key appointments, and they include, of course, ambassadors. So it's a process that takes them before the Senate, where they have the opportunity to answer questions. about their vision and their plans, etc. Mr. Cohen's hearing went extremely well, but again, it is in the Senate, and we don't want to get in front of that process. The President has nominated him, and we're hopeful that the Senate will act soon to confirm him. Because one of the reasons I'm here is because we had not had an ambassador in a while, and we did not want Canada to misunderstand that not having someone confirmed by the Senate did not mean that Canada did not remain an important partner to us. We have some 1,200 Americans and Canadians working throughout Canada in our consulates. We have 7 consulates. We have our embassy in Ottawa that are working every day to strengthen the relationship. And of course, when we have a confirmed ambassador, he will take the helm and continue to lead that work.
All right, well, thank you for that lesson. And I'll grab my phone, not to be rude, but just to see what kind of questions we're getting from the audience. So, President Biden's pick for ambassador to Canada, David Cohen, recently said that the U.S. is waiting for Justin Trudeau's government updated China policy. What is the U.S. expecting and hoping for in that regard?
Clearly, the People's Republic of China is a very important country, a country that we need to work with productively. We welcome their decision to release the 2 Michaels, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, who were unjustly detained for over 1,000 days. I applaud Canada's initiative. They have the Declaration Against the Use of Arbitrary Detention in State-to-State Relations. That was a very important milestone that was supported by many, many countries because hostage diplomacy, there's no room for hostage diplomacy. That said, as our Secretary of State Blinken has said, we want to collaborate with China, where we can. And on climate, there is an opportunity there. We will compete, where we should, and we will, confront them when we must, essentially. So it's an important issue for many, many countries, to be sure. I know that I think what we want to see from Canada is continued engagement on China. It's a very complicated question. And again, it's in the course of our relations. We're always exchanging information and our ideas for engaging in the larger international community. So we have regular consultations on this, and so I think what was referred to in that question is that we are eager to understand Canada's vision on China, not only on China, the Indo-Pacific and many other areas.
Right, and on the 2 Michaels coming home, I think this was such a moment of relief for all Canadians, and hopefully the end of a nightmare no one else has to live through. And I find it interesting exactly that you brought up this declaration against the use of arbitrary detention. The Vienna Convention is supposed to set what's allowable between countries that have diplomatic relations, and certainly arbitrary detention should not. So there seems to be a bit of a gap in international law on making that clear. So I know that Canada was happy to see so many countries sign on. Earlier, we talked a little bit, I raised the topic of supply chains during COVID. Now we talked a little bit about China. So we certainly, many of us countries around the world were in shock at the beginning of COVID in terms of supply chains being interrupted, may it be for PPE, pharmaceutical industry. Are there specific initiatives on supply chain to make sure that we have more secure and reliable supply chain in North America or with European partners to prevent this from happening again?
There is robust engagement and working groups that are in fact looking at these issues all of the time. So absolutely, it's something we don't take for granted that we have to work at. It just doesn't happen. By modernizing our trade relationships and the like, we are able to, again, overcome these challenges that of course COVID has brought into sharp relief. The fact that these issues are very important. We need to be resilient, and we need to put practices and agreements in place so that we won't have these disruptions into the future.
All right, so I did ask a question about the border, but it seems to be a question, a topic of interest for the audience. So more specifically, this person asked, many Canadians, particularly the business and touristic sectors, are getting impatient with disclosure. Could you explain a bit more about why this border is still closed and what Canadians can expect?
Well, again, as I mentioned before, it is remarkable that the border has really remained open to essential travel, and people have been able to go, when they needed to go to the United States. So much of the border policy is dictated by public health and science, and so we want to get it right. We want to make sure that when we open it, it is sustainable, that in fact there are guidelines in place so that everybody is not confused about what would be required to be able to cross the border. I think the Delta variant threw a wrench into this process, because I think we were all surprised by how devastating that was when it appeared as though we were almost getting to the point where we were getting beyond this pandemic. But we've come a long way, and the vaccination rates are up and the like. So I don't have a crystal ball to predict exactly when this will happen, but suffice it to say that there are serious discussions ongoing in Washington and with our partners, not just Canada, but from around the world, that we can put into place a policy that works for everyone and no one will be surprised by. I'm optimistic that there is light at the end of this tunnel, but I don't have anything to announce today. Right. Again, you've opened your border in a very good way, requiring vaccinations, requiring PCR tests and the like, and we want to be able to do something as effective so that we are all protected.
Right, and what's interesting in that question, which is on a lot of Canadians' mind, is I was listening to some congressmen, part of this Northern Border Caucus, across both sides of the House, Republican and Democrat. And it seems that they are like-minded to the Canadian position in this desire to see it reopen, especially in states like Michigan, where the movement just needs to be fluid.
No, absolutely. It has taken a toll without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, the families on both sides of the border, they've been, really inconvenienced. It's been tough. I don't want to minimize the effect of this. But again, you can fly into the United States. There have been, ways that we have managed to keep this open to essential travel. And again, we want to do something in a comprehensive way that is sustainable over the long term, so that we don't have to backtrack if we have other issues that come down the pike.
All right. No scoop today, but you can call us, and okay. We'll pass on the message whenever there's an update. You mentioned Afghanistan earlier, and obviously we talk a lot about the American withdrawal from Afghanistan, but it was a multilateral mission. Canada troops announced the withdrawal of its troop in 2011, but last troop left in 2014, though Canada remained one of the top financial contributors to the NATO mission, and with a strong diplomatic presence. So I think many Canadians and Americans have been witnessing the withdrawal from Afghanistan with much angst. What do you think our two countries can do going forward on Afghanistan, and for those special visa holder and other Afghans that have supported these missions to be safe both in Afghanistan or outside if they should be leaving?
Well, it's certainly significant that we were able to evacuate 124,000 Americans, allied partners, and vulnerable Afghans, you know, in the immediate aftermath. So that is significant. What is also significant is that Canada has agreed to take 40,000 refugees. Initially 20,000, now has made it 40,000. They've agreed to work closely with us to take, you know, at least 5,000 of those that we are perhaps unable to accommodate ourselves. So we very much appreciate this, and of course Canada has a lot of experience, you know, with Syrian refugees and refugees from all over, and again is really an example for the world of how to effectively integrate refugees into a country. So the hard work is just beginning, but we continue to work very closely together, and I know you've already accommodated a number of these refugees, and again, it's just the beginning, but we must have at least weekly meetings, you know, with Canada and our other partners on this very issue of Afghanistan. And as you noted, our commitment doesn't end now that we are no longer have a military presence there, but the humanitarian assistance and leveraging our influence with the new government in Afghanistan is going to be key to protect, you know, the accomplishments for women and young girls, and, you know, certain democratic freedoms that were absent until recently there. So again, the hard work is just beginning, but not only with refugees, but in continuing to engage on Afghanistan to deal with the challenges there.
Thank you. So we've spoken quite a bit about our southern border, but maybe I'll take you for a minute to our northern border, to the Arctic. So where are the areas where Canadian and American interests in the Arctic overlap, and are there still issues to be resolved?
I'm not an Arctic expert. I do understand, though, how important it is to both our countries. Of course, you know, Canada, the United States, Russia, and of course our Nordic partners in Iceland, you know, form a very cohesive group that really works, I think, very responsibly in understanding, you know, what needs to be done in the Arctic and how we can work in concert and you know, effectively to protect that important area. So I believe that process will be ongoing, and there's where we will find common ground on what we need to do there. Certainly, whatever happens in the Arctic, you know, we need to take into account the Indigenous, the First Nations people that are there. So it can't be in a vacuum, and we need to accommodate their concerns and their priorities first and foremost. Of course, the climate issue comes straight into this as well. You know, we can't seek to exploit a region that is very fragile, again, because we pay long-term consequences. So it is front and center for us, but again, it's one of these issues that must be dealt with in a multilateral fashion, so that all of the world's interests are taken into account.
Thank you. So you are at l'Université de Montréal. I am a professor, so I gotta ask you a question a little bit for my constituents. So is there more we can do, Canada-US, in terms of education, in terms of university exchange, in terms of integration? I certainly feel strong about that, having studied in the US. And I'm also wondering, a little bit footnote on that, obviously there's a historic francophonie link, but today, is there more that can be done as well in French?
Absolutely. Again, it's really impressive to see how you work well, you know, in two languages in this, you know, international city, this cosmopolitan city. I understand, Montreal is so much like Boston in terms of the sheer number of students that you have here. So that's really significant.
Or Boston is like Montreal.
Oh, Boston is like Montreal. But again, we have a comparative advantage because, people from around the world want to study in our countries because we, have such excellent institutions of higher learning. And so in that sense, we can leverage our influence and our values and things, and I think we should continue to encourage this. Again, we love exchange programs. Essentially, Americans don't have to go to Europe to study in French, certainly. And again, we hope to have, that taken to another level, essentially, because, as I say, we have so much in common. And we can leverage so much of our strengths and our comparative advantages that, we would be, silly not to do so.
Right. And I'm thinking also going beyond the education experience to research. We see a lot of good work coming out of centers like the Wilson Center, but I think there's always eagerness and desire from our research institutions like l'Université de Montréal to see ways of doing more research together. Of course, it happens already a lot, but it's never enough in our view.
That's right. That's right. And again, I think certainly we want to invest more in education in our own country. Again, it's such an advantage that we have, but again, we all end up winning when we reproduce, these environments where people can prosper and do research and, be on the cutting edge of all the technological change, whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, Canada does so much of that. And I think, there are so many potential Silicon Valleys here and more in our country that we need to keep, developing that potential.
I heard someone say that a lot of the Canada-US supply chain is now brains, right? So we got to think about how to ensure the fluidity and the safety of this supply chain in terms of individuals.
Right.
So a question that's dear to my heart. So Canada's announced or spoken publicly about having a feminist foreign policy. Certainly, I think we can expect, even though the cabinet's not been named yet, to have a gender-balanced cabinet. This is also something we're seeing more and more in provincial governments as well. When there was the negotiation of the new NAFTA, there was a modernization, there was discussions about the potential gender chapter. What do you think Canada and the US can do more on gender? How does feminism or gender factor into the US foreign policy?
Well, it's very interesting because I had a colleague who had a young daughter that grew up when Madeleine Albright was our Secretary of State, and then Condoleezza Rice was our Secretary of State, and then Hillary Clinton was our Secretary of State. And then when John Kerry came along, he says, well, I thought Secretaries of States had to be women. And so essentially it was just interesting that it was unnatural for a man to be in that position. Right. So I think that example really empowered a lot of women and girls, to understand that, they really do have advantages when it comes to diplomacy. The State Department is now bringing in probably 50% of its entry classes are women. We certainly have at least a third, if not more, of our chiefs of mission who are women. 40% of our diplomats in the senior foreign service are women. So obviously we have a way to go. We're not there yet, but it did take, some really concerted action to make sure that this happened. But it started at the top, when you do actually, name secretaries of state, who are women who contribute as these women have.
What about ambassador nomination in terms of people in post? Is it also gender balanced?
Gender balanced, we do it differently. It's not a 50-50 thing, but certainly it is a priority, and they strive to increase the numbers. So, it has increased dramatically in recent years. Again, not because it's, the right thing to do only, but it's the smart thing to do because again, they're very effective. So again, I see us moving in that direction. I think Canada sets a very important example in that regard. But I'm proud of the progress we've made, and hopefully we can continue to make that progress.
All right, thank you. I mean, I do remember a meeting in Vancouver on the Korean Peninsula that was co-hosted Canada-US. And what I think is an interesting initiative that happened to some degree at that meeting, but that can be reproduced, is also the involvement of civil society and feminist leader and women's group at these diplomatic meetings to just, it does change what's on the agenda in the end.
No, I mean, at the State Department, if you look at, some of our leading, undersecretaries, Deputy Secretary Wendy Sherman, it's just an amazing talent. Undersecretary for Political Affairs, Torian Newland. Undersecretary Azra Zaya for Global Affairs and Human Rights, Democracy. Bonnie Jenkins, again, for technology, and it goes on. And again, they weren't put there artificially. They earned those positions. Nobody questions, their ability to do the job because they have a great track record. So I do see major advancements in this area, towards equity. That's very important.
One last question, if I may. So you mentioned briefly earlier that you had worked as I don't want to misrepresent the title, global talent manager at the State Department.
Yes.
We often have this reflection in Canada on what's the best way to recruit, retain, and nurture diplomatic talent. In your experience, how do you build this top of the line diplomatic service and make sure people are happy?
Well, again, we need to get out and compete for talent. We need to get out and explain to the American people why diplomats matter to the bottom line. That's so important. Many people have this skewed vision that diplomats are elitist and somehow, removed from everyday American life. And no, diplomats help create jobs. Diplomats help American citizens in need. Diplomats, help in crises, whether it's hurricanes, earthquakes, civil strife and the like. So I think it's important to really tell that story and to build support for what it is that we're doing, to compete for the very best talent. Essentially, you need to compete with Wall Street and Amazon and Google, and explain to people why it's important for them to consider public service careers. So that's important first and foremost. Resources are as well, as I mentioned. If Amazon's paying an intern for the summer and we can't, then obviously they're going to drift towards Amazon, because often they need to be able to afford,
The reality is we also can pay them.
Exactly, absolutely. So that makes a huge difference, because we're communicating that we value your work, we value your contribution. And the best way for you to understand us is to be a part of us. We have interns doing work that diplomats do because they're so gifted and smart and good writers and things. And so that's incredibly empowering. But it's a commitment over many, many years. And so again, we have to be deliberate. We have to cast a wide net. We want the very best and brightest. And again, we just need to get out there and tell our story, because this is a consequential role for people to have. It makes a huge difference, in our world, to have diplomats that are good at what they're doing.
Maybe also doing more of those. I know they happen already, diplomatic exchanges between countries. So
yes, they do.
Can learn embedded.
We love that embedded, and we do a lot of it with Canada and law enforcement and across, so absolutely, because again, that's why diplomats live overseas, to understand and live among people and understand, unique cultures. Embedding in bureaucracies has the same effect.
Well, you'll have to come back to Montreal to work on this embeddedness. We have to show you more of our university culture, but also everything that we have here to offer. So I cannot thank you enough, Ambassador Chacon, for being with us today at l'Université de Montréal and at the Cerium, Thank you to our audience on YouTube who sent all these great questions. Merci beaucoup d'avoir été parmi nous.
Merci à tous et toutes.